On this episode of Black in the Stacks, I chat with Kaetrena Davis Kendrick about the systemic causes of low morale and workplace harm within library environments, recognizing and naming instances of workplace harm, and practical strategies for personal recovery after such experiences. Kaetrena Davis Kendrick is a dynamic and uplifting researcher, leader, consultant, and coach. Her mission is to inspire authentic collegiality and to promote well being, share the gifts of creativity, and cultivate empathetic, engaged leadership in the workplace. She also helps people who are struggling in dysfunctional workplaces recognize, reconcile, and begin to recover from their experiences. Well, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, Marquita. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for saying yes. It's always a crapshoot when I reach out to people, but I'm glad so far we're good.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Sure. So, for those listening who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, how you found yourself in librarianship. Just give us the elevator speech.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Kaetrena Davis Kendrick. I am a researcher, consultant, coach. I'm a librarian who helps library workers, essentially, is where I am right now. I'm the owner of Kendrick Consulting and Communications, LLC, which is currently known as Renewals in the broader field. I came to librarianship. I was always in libraries. Even as a young child, I was always in the library. But when I got older, as I moved through my undergraduate career and into after graduation, I found myself working in libraries. So I was an undergraduate library worker. Work study got me through school, and my chosen area of employment was in the library. And when I graduated, I was like, well, I need me a job. And I found my first job in library. So I was a paraprofessional, or what we used to call paraprofessionals. That's what they called me at that point. And I was working in libraries in various areas up until I decided to go to library school. And the instigator for that was I knew that I was at a nonprofit, and I knew I was coming up to the end of that work. And when I was thinking about where I really enjoyed being or doing, it was really about where I enjoyed being. That was all what master's program I'm going to do. And it was two things, communication and libraries. And it just so happened that when I put in both of those applications, Clark Atlanta reached out to me first, also with scholarship. So that's where I went. And it wasn't a bad choice for me because it was a place that I enjoyed. So I graduated from the historic Clark Atlanta University, and I always knew I wanted to be in academic librarianship because that's where most of my paraprofessional work was. And since then, I've been mostly in academic libraries. My last formal position was at a regional comprehensive university as a dean. And so now I am working with libraries. I left that position and am working more directly with library workers in a support role wherever those organizations need help.
That's quite a trajectory
Yeah.
from, yeah, just paraprofessional into entrepreneurship, essentially, is what you're doing now. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us if there was one thing or multiple things that prompted you to start renewals, and what exactly is it?
It was one thing, and it wasn't, it was my research since 2020, since 2016. I can't believe it's been I can't believe it, but
10 years.
10 years, a decade. I have always been a researcher. And in 2016, I decided that something happened, and I said, well, let me go see. And the thing that happened was something happened to me in my workplace. And I'm like, I think I'm having low morale. Well, is it? Well, let me go see. And so I asked people about their low morale experiences. And the trajectory of that work, I kept doing more work. So I started with academic library work, and then I partnered with Ione T. Damasco there at the University of Dayton, and we did a second study on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And then people were like, "Well, why don't you talk to us?" So I was like, "Okay." So I started talking with public library workers, and it just kept going. And as I continued my work, just started slowly really ever realized that, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. Oh,
Hmm.
and what I felt like I was realizing was, oh, I'm sp I'm supposed to be helping library workers who don't get help, and they're having this experience. Oh, okay. And now it wasn't a okay at that point. I struggled a lot with it, but that's what started renewal. But renewals before it was a business was a space for people to come talk about their experiences. So I started with a group on Facebook so people could go in and talk, have a support network. And then as I was doing that, I was still working as a librarian in libraries, but I was just slowly realizing, oh, there's more. I just kept and I kept doing the studies too. So the
Mm.
more I kept learning, the more I was just realizing it's great being a librarian, and I've enjoyed and I still enjoy working with students where I can. And also, library workers need support. Like they think they're dealing with this by themselves. They think they're the only ones. Like I'm in the fifth study, and people still like I'm the only one. I thought I was the only one. So my goal is to make sure people know they're not alone.
Yeah. And I feel like I've definitely read through the Facebook group. When you kind of first started out, that's kind of how you came on my radar,
Hmm.
because I was in the system and I was experiencing low morale, and I felt exactly how people feel. Like I was like, it can't just be me. I can't be the only one.
Yeah.
Um, but I, but I found your group. I think I found a couple of other groups. There's, I don't want to say it because I still post in there anonymously sometimes. But there's a
Okay.
couple of different groups on Facebook,
Hmm.
um, that just kind of helped me um, find that okay moment, like you mentioned. A lot. I do this podcast to stay connected to library world, even though I don't work in traditional libraries anymore.
Hmm.
I most recently was a learning experience librarian for a K through 8 social studies company, so that kind of kept me connected. Um, but there's not a ton that I miss about being in libraries. There are
Hmm.
things, but there aren't a ton of things that would draw me back into that world. It would have to be a really, really special position,
Hmm.
um, to draw me back in that traditional space,
Hmm.
because of the low morale, because of what I now know was bullying, because of what I now know was intimidation, because of what I now know was retaliation. Um, and a lot of that, I think, came from people doing the work like yourself, groups that, the research that you've done, other people who've done, similar research, just in a different focus.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think the Facebook group was probably the first time I ever heard your name. And then, of course, being a librarian, I do what we do when researching. I was like, oh, so I was like,
Oh,
instant
thank
follow.
you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm so sorry that, I will never be I feel like I need a moment.
Yeah.
It grieves me to hear you tell me that you've gone through this experience and the immediate impact, like the impact that it has, like you're not sure if you're ever gonna come back to a traditional library space. So it's the grief of hearing I'm never happy that people are validating my research. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm I'm in this weird space of I'm never happy. Like I'm having a reaction in my body right now about hearing you share this experience. Thank you for sharing it.
Mm, yeah.
And also the grief of what people miss out on because you're not in these library spaces, you know,
Mhm,
where we are so needed for all of the reasons of, service and everything. And yes, representation for Black, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, but it's just your energy, like the wholeness of you that people now miss out on in terms of what we can do for our communities. I'm happy that I'm doing the work because, like you said, you get to name things. You get to know that you're not by yourself. You get to know that this is a real experience that really happened to you, and there's context around it. You get to know that yes, it's personal to you, and also there's systems. It's both. It's not a either or. It's a both and. It's personal to you because it happened to you, and it's also because of systems that you have not as much control over, and you don't have the capacity to take on all of that. We need community to do that. So I'm glad
mm,
about the research in that way, and
mm.
also just really pissed. because it's never
Yeah.
fun to hear that people are going through this experience. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but as much as I completely feel what you're saying with that, for me
Mhm.
too, like
Yeah.
being able to now put labels in it and put them in
Mhm.
boxes, I can spot when an
Yes.
organization does and does not fit me. Where
Yes.
as I couldn't before. Like if I had had the methodology to describe what I was going through as I was going through it, who
Yes.
knows, right?
It's
Because I was on a
powerful.
very good, yeah, I was on a very good, trajectory of library director. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Well, that's the thing
um,
about
yeah,
naming. If
hmm
you can name something, even if you can't cure it, right? Like think about someone, I think about it through the lens, and I've never been through this experience, but so I'm presuming, but like let's say you aren't feeling well, you go to the doctor, they keep telling you nothing's wrong, and then one person says, "Let me do a different test," or "Let me ask a different question." They ask a question that no one has asked you before. So you can give an answer that gives a different piece of information. And then they say, "I think it may be so and so. Let's do the test for." And boom, there it is. And whether or not it's curable, don't you feel better? I have a
yes,
name for it. And now we can make a countermeasure for it. At least
yes,
we can now know what to try. We know definitely it never was that you should drink more water. It was something else, right? It
yes,
never was your quote unquote overweight. It was something else that had nothing to do. It never was about nutrition. It was something else. So now at least we can narrow it down to figure out the measures now that we know what the context is. We have the name. Now we know what it's not, and we know what it is. So now we know where we can start. That's it. It gives you a power.
hmm
It gives you power.
yeah. So I know people listening might kind of hear low morale and then automatically relate it or confuse it with burnout. So,
Mhm.
how do you define the phenomenon of low morale experiences and what makes it a systemic issue rather than an individual one?
So certainly when people think about low morale, usually they'll tell me like what I consider traditional markers, right? Like pay, lack of recognition for a job, unclear job duties, job creep, things like that. And those are all valid markers when we think about it traditionally, but they're discrete, right? They feel it seems like if I just get more pay, then I won't have low morale. If I get a award at the end of the year for this project that I did, then I won't have low morale anymore. But when people talk about the experience of low morale, this is an experience too. And that's the phenomenon of it, in that when people talk about it, they don't mention those things right off. What they'll tell me is a narrative of I've been harmed for a long time at my job. What makes it different from burnout is a state of exhaustion marked by depersonalization, um, a sense of disconnection from the work. Okay. So when we think about those differences, you can certainly be exhausted by while being treated very well. No one's
Mhm.
harming you. You might be sort of harming yourself because you're overworking, right? But no
Yeah.
one at work is physically abusing you. No one at work is emotionally harming you. The system is working in your favor. Um, you're not being the systems aren't being weaponized against you. People are including you, and you could still be burned out because it's a state of exhaustion, right?
hmm
That's the difference. Now, when we think about it through systems, they're an enabling system. So low morale is not just the harm that you're experiencing from people or systems or people running systems. Let me be very clear. People running systems that are being weaponized against you or that are working the way they were designed to work to exclude you. What makes it, those are things that are happening. So someone's doing something to you implicitly, explicitly to cause harm to you. But there are also enabling systems at play. So enabling systems are things that if they worked like they were supposed to, then the harm would be reduced. So an enabling system would be something like staffing. Because if we had enough staff, right, then
hmm
maybe you wouldn't be subject to the overwork that the organization is subjecting to you. I'm not talking about you subjecting yourself to overwork. right? Now we can go into vocational. All those are sort of frameworks that frame out the larger library information science field. But we look at
Mm.
enabling systems. Most people don't have control over who gets hired, who gets fired, their scheduling, so on and so forth. Another enabling system would be HR, right? If I go to HR and I tell HR that I'm being harmed, they're going to enact some policy that will stop the harm or reduce the harm. But most people report that when that happens, that does not occur. So it's a systemic thing. These are things that if they were supposed to be working like they were supposed to, like they should, then the harm will be reduced. And then when we go into frameworks too, which sort of act as systems, but they're more expectations and norms in the field. One of them, of course, I mentioned just a few minutes ago, vocational from Fobazi Ettar, and I just want to acknowledge um,
Mhm.
her passing here. Another one would be the burnout. It's a framework that stands out because, and resilience narratives too. So resilience narratives is another sort of system slat, more of a norm that is perpetuated in libraries, i.e., we're going to do more with less, which tends to harm people um, with marginalized or intersecting identities more than others. So it's not just the interpersonal behaviors, is systems that help it along, and it's frameworks of expectation that could lead to
Mhm.
burnout. But like I said, all those things could be working well for you, and you could be burnt out.
You also kind of discuss trigger events in your
Mhm.
research that kickstart the low morale experience. Can you talk a little about common catalysts for, I guess, such trigger events that you found in library workspaces?
Well, I haven't found common catalysts, but I will share that it seems to me that if there was a catalyst, it is poor communication is
Mm.
the cat is the thing, right? Like think about I'm sure you and I could have a lots of conversations. And also I call these
Yes.
activation events now rather than trigger events,
Okay.
although they were labeled as such, but as I've evolved my language to be less violent, I call them activation events. Generally, they're coming from miscommunication and just default passive communication. The default conversation, the default language or conversational mode for library workers generally is passive aggressive.
Mhm.
The passive aggressive. So if it's passive aggressive, then we're all walking away unclear, disembodied,
Mhm.
hypervigilant, ruminative, right? Because what did they
Yeah.
really mean? Now I got to sit here and try to figure out what they really want. Was she harming me? Did she mean to insult me? Did they mean, you just taking it as you can't take a joke, or that's not what I meant. What did you mean? You know, so that's it. And then even when I talk about verbal abuse, so one of the abuse types is verbal abuse and written abuse. And this includes not writing things down. So have you ever had an instance where someone keeps just telling you something, but they're not clear, and so you ask for the documentation and they just refuse to write it down? Because if you write it down, then I have a record of it, right? Now I can
Mhm.
FOIA if I need to or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And so some people will never write things down but always have complaints. So to me, that's a more form of passive aggressive communication where I'm deliberately not being clear at this point. Like I'm asking you to be clear and you're not giving me the documentation, right? So to me, that's the broadest catalyst is going to be we struggle being clear. For many library workers, assertive communication is aggressive communication, and that's problematic.
Mhm.
And once things get unclear, then imagine
Yeah.
the tension. Now we can move into more active bullying, right? Because we can always use that point of unclear communication to intimidate,
Mhm.
to bully, to mob.
Mhm.
And then the person who's being harmed can't be assertive because
Yep.
now we have a, ba- a misbalance of power because there's more harmers than person who's being harmed at that point as it continues, or that person who's harming gets more and more aggressive truly as they continue their shenanigans
Yeah.
of communication.
Because I want to keep my library open, I will refrain from
I
naming
see.
names,
I
but I,
appreciate your your resonant your
my
signals of
candor,
resonance.
yes. Yes, but I hearing again, hearing knowing your work and hearing it again out loud in this moment, just I promise you, I don't think you have, but at least one of the library systems that I've worked for fits everything that you have
Oh
said
my
thus
goodness.
far. Everything.
Yeah, oh no. Oh, boo. Yeah, this
Yay!
is where I
Aw.
am like, "Yay, the research is researching,
It's
boo. The
yeah, but
outcome is
aw.
outcoming." Yeah.
But we grow from
Yeah.
it, right? I look at my time in trad libraries as my formative years
Mhm,
to kind of that gave me those transferable skills that I'm using now in my
mhm.
current full-time job, in my hobbies, in building this podcast platform, and leveling up into merchandise and productions. And so I will never hate on my library experience, the good and the bad, because it's leading me somewhere I don't quite know where, but it has led and is leading me um somewhere great. So at this point I'm
Yeah.
just, as the younger people say, doing it for the plot. So
Well, don't
it's
lose it.
just I won't. I
All
won't.
right now.
I'm in control of it.
All right.
It's my story. So,
All right, all right.
let's talk a little bit about how race and systemic factors show up in your work. So, you've conducted some specific research with, as you mentioned before, Ione Damasco out of the University of Dayton. You've done
Yeah.
research. Yeah, send it to her. She listens.
Yeah.
Research on the low morale experiences of ethnic and racial minority academic
Mhm.
librarians. So, how does emotional and system abuse uniquely shape how those librarians navigate their workplaces, or careers?
Yeah. So we did this second study, because the first study, we didn't get a high enough power of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the first research cohort or sample, excuse me, purposes sample. And we did not say only Caucasians, but so I always like to say when you see a study, colleagues, when you see a study, go ahead. If it applies to you, go ahead because
Yeah,
that first study came out
participate,
in
please.
2017, right? And this study didn't come out till 2019. That's a year or 2 years that we didn't have this data that we could have just reported if we had a higher power. So, I'm just gonna put that out there, colleagues. But that being said, when we did the study, one things I realized is that, first off, they were more likely this group was more likely to report that the type of abuse that was having that activation event was emotional abuse and system abuse, which in hindsight, this is kind of how you sort of like, duh, but also maybe not. Like we had to ask. But how what it does is it offers up these new impact factors. So impact factors are the higher class of enabling systems. So when we think about what is causing this thing, so we have impact factors, and within that are enabling systems. Impact factors are these broad things that are influencing the low morale experience from its beginning to its quote unquote end. Term end here, very loose, because there sort of is no end, as you and I have already sort of hinted at from various and sundry reasons. Um, but there's two impact factors that show up differently that this group surfaced, and that those are stereotype threat and de-authentication. Stereotype threat is when we move into a space that we feel like may be hostile, and we recognize that within that space where we're going, people may have stereotypes about our racial or ethnic or other back identities. And we fight against those preemptively before when we show up in the space. So that's a lot of preemptive emotional labor. So a stereotype threat would be something like Black people are lazy. And so what do we do when we roll up into these spaces? We feel like we need to show that we're not lazy, like people think we are, quote unquote, or the stereotype that precedes us in this
Mm-hmm.
identity. And so what do we do when we show up? We gotta do all the work so nobody thinks that we are what they think we are according to the stereotype. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, that's a lot of labor.
Yeah.
And it's ingrained in our culture too, like, how have your elders, ancestors, you gotta be twice as good to be blah, 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 right? That's a
Uh-huh.
stereotype threat.
Yep.
Um, and then the other one is de-authentication that shows up for Black, Indigenous people of color navigating harm in their workplace, and that is when they feel that harm, they're gonna start tapping down on sharing aspects of themselves because they know now that that might be weaponized against them, or they'll be asked to overrepresent in some way, or be the monolithic mascot, the monolithic
Mhm.
touch point
Yep.
because, so and so. So, for instance, if you are Korean, you're not going to bring your kimchi to lunch. If you celebrate Diwali, you're not going to talk about that because now you got to tell me all the things, right? You got to tell me,
Mhm.
oh, you're not gonna.
Mhm.
Maybe you decide that you're not gonna wear your ethnic head covering,
Mhm.
right? Even though it's something that you would wear, you're not gonna wear those earrings. You're not. Maybe you should blow out your hair today.
Yeah.
um, or because you're having a meeting with the provost. Maybe I'll blow out my natural hair today. All that is de-authentication because that might be weaponized you while you're already navigating harm. And so any of these other decisions that are true to you because of your racial background, your cultural heritage, may be weaponized against you, so you tamp those things down. Maybe you make a more pronounced effort to enunciate, to lower the accent from your first language, right? All that de-authentication. And the interesting thing about these two things is that they are internally motivated, whereas the other ones from the original study are external. Okay.
Mm.
Contagion is external. You're realizing other people are being harmed, right? Insidiousness is you're just in the process and you don't really know it. Those are made the impact factors for the general experience. But when you're Black, Indigenous, people of color, you have those things, contagion and insidious experience development, plus, which are external, plus you may be experiencing the internal things, which create these defense mechanisms or this more emotional labor because you're trying to manage the harm that might come to you as opposed to the harm that's already come to you.
So let's pivot into the renewals framework.
Mhm.
So your renewals model has a three-step path: recognize, renew, and rejuvenate. Can you tell us about that model and how you came up with it?
Well, so that's the thing, I didn't come up with it. Literally everything comes from my research.
Mm.
Everything comes from the research. So my job is to what did the people tell me? And when they tell me something, okay, well, how might I help them? The first thing is people recognizing what's happening to them. That comes directly from my research. What is happening? The research has named it. This is what's happening. These are
Mhm.
ways it's happening. These are the things that's letting it happen, right? And but also people don't generally recognize that they're being harmed because another part, if I go back to the catalyst too, is librarians are so nice. Surely they're not meaning to harm me because we just so nice.
So nice. We
So we
love
tend to
everybody.
diminutize when people are harming us because it's so out of pocket to what we think library workers are also subject to the stereotypes of librarianship.
Yep.
So we tend to, oh, they didn't mean that, or they're just, right? So that
Mhm.
insidious experience happening. And plus, because we are usually most people in libraries present as women, we tend to also kind of not
Mhm.
state directly when someone is harming us that first time because we don't want the harmer to get mad at us. Meanwhile, they're harming us. So those are also other catalysts too. So I want to cut back to that. So communication and then diminutizing when people are harming you from those early marks, right? Because librarians are so nice. So it comes out of the research. So recognize what's happening to you and err on the side of your intuition always. The first thing a moral morale experience will have you do is decenter your intuition because librarians are so nice. And when I'm in the
Mhm.
library, right?
Right.
Um, the other thing is when we talk about renew, once you can remember, we talk about that metaphor of once you know a thing, then you can reframe a thing and not reframe it as if saying, oh, that really wasn't happening. But now you can reframe your power in what's happening. like you just mentioned earlier. Now that I know what it is, I know how to move. So how
Mm-hmm.
might we then renew ourselves to move differently? Because when you are going through low morale, number one, you diminutize. And then two, once you realize, if you do realize what's happening, now we're in a shame spiral because we all think that if somebody's saying something to us, then I know what I do is blah, blah, blah. But it's highly likely that you might not do those things, especially if most people don't do those things because it's a slow moving experience and it's a system thing. And we are one person, okay, against a system. And, you know, and then the contagion, you realize that a lot of people are navigating, it's normalized in your organization. And when you are the one that says something, guarantee you're an outlier and you're the problem. Okay. So now we're in a shame spiral. So we have to reframe our power. So that's the renewing part. How might we reframe, refresh, gather our power, and renew our confidence in ourselves that this is never your fault? And then once we can do that, we can rejuvenate. This is a longer process because we have to get our energy back. We have to retrieve our capacity back. We have to retrieve our confidence. And all of these take a long time. So none of these processes are short, but it allows us to reframe where we are and center where we are in our recovery process so we know how to move and increase our capacity so we can continue into recovery.
Out of that, why is why does it seem like recognition, so recognizing the thing, why does it seem like that's the hardest, but also the most necessary first step for library workers?
It's hard again because no one wants to think they're being harmed. No one wants to be like, I decided that this is my career. I know what libraries can do for our community. This is a really great way for me to do that. And then you come in and you can't even do that. And if we want to
Yeah.
break it down to the stereotype, like let's break it down to someone who might be thinking about what libraries could be because we're not immune to the stereotype, right? I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna read to kids, I'm gonna check books in and out, and it's gonna be great. Why can't I eat? Why is somebody telling me I have to eat lunch in 20 seconds? Like, why is somebody telling me that they want me to do 10 people's jobs at one time? Why is someone, you know, making me do only the Spanish language things just because I speak Spanish when I actually would love to be teaching the crochet class over here?
Mm-hmm.
Why, when I said that we should help the patron this way, now no one talks to me at lunch? Why, when I told Becky not to talk to me like that, why am I being moved to the another branch just because I said Becky screamed at me on the thing?
Mm-hmm.
I let Charles know that a library user threw a water bottle at me, and expect me to not do anything about that. They keep letting this person in the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, these are the things that people share with me, like, these are ideas. So, that's one of the reasons, number 1, like, who are you gonna tell? You know? And this goes for leaders too, and it's not just people who are working in the front facing. Leaders also have low morale experiences, and they experience even greater situations of isolation because if your water trustee head is the one that's harming you, who are you reporting that to?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we have to figure out this idea of as administrators versus, the workers. We're all in the Titanic. And you know who died in the Titanic? The first class men. So, and a lot of people, like most of the people who are on the Titanic, if we want to use this metaphor, yes, it was steerage, but a lot of people in first class also passed away. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So we're all on the same boat, so to speak, when it comes to this issue. And the other thing I want to mention too is that as you move up, if you've been harmed, like you mentioned implicitly here that you've experienced some harm, do you think you take that with you to a leadership role? Do you think that informs how you treat people if you already in defense mode from, or your leader was the one that did that, so now you're doing it the way you were taught how to lead? So you want to be
Mm-hmm.
thinking about this. It's very important that you recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause if you don't, you will put it to other people.
Yeah. And uh, I want to say something, but it's going to give it away. But I have seen that very thing where someone who was trained under someone who was a terrible leader
Mhm.
had no business being in a leadership role whatsoever. train the person under them. And then when they left and that person that was being trained ascended,
Mhm.
they did the exact same thing because it was working for the person before me. So it should work for me. And
Mhm.
it just, it didn't and it doesn't. Um, it's more harm than anything because now you've learned all this bad leadership from the person ahead of you. You're in that same position. You're leading the same way. But now
Mhm.
there's someone who has taken your position and now they're looking at you. And it's just a
It's
constant
just
cycle. Yes.
yeah.
And I really wanted to be the person to break that cycle, but I was burnt out
Yeah.
and I could not do it. I don't believe in regrets. Like I think we make the decisions with the information that we have on hand in that
At the
moment
time.
at the
Mhm.
time. But I do wish that I had at least attempted again to break that cycle despite still being burnt out, still being worn out, still in the recognition phase. Um, because I do value the work of libraries. I love what libraries do for I love what I did in my time in them for my communities and for other
Mhm.
communities because I've had people call me from, the islands. I've had people call me from other states. I've had people reach
Mhm.
out to me from other countries about the things that I did in my little old Georgia, system and
Yeah.
everything. But again, that speaks to the power of libraries and, what they can do for um, not just our local communities, but our global communities as
Mhm.
well.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. So yeah, recognizing where you are, and I think too here, Marquita, the important thing here is where you mention where you are. You know, self-compassion is a skill that low morale takes away from you. So when we talk about that renews part, the rejuvenation part, that's the part that I think is really important to the work as I
Mhm.
continue navigating countermeasures. Take that time to get back into your body. You it's never a binary, right? You can do great work and still be burned out. And the other thing I was mention too is when we think about leadership and leading through toxic organizations, one thing that come out of my leadership study is the impact factor of legacy toxicity.
Mhm.
So if you're inheriting a toxic organization, there's this sub phenomenon of like it's not only impact factor, it's almost like a sub phenomenon, but I don't have time right now um, to do all these things. But there's this, it's almost like a little baby sub phenomenon. But I say that with caution because I haven't researched it, but it feels like a sub phenomenon. Like I could probably do another study there and just look at legacy toxicity because it's not just inheriting the toxicity, it's recognizing this other piece, and that is people will come to you and say, "Oh my gosh, now you're here, please fix it. We got a new person.
Yes.
Yes, fix it. Yes, this is our chance. The old person
Yep.
gone. They treat us so badly. It was all their fault. They did all the awful things. Welcome in. Can you fix it?" And then you say, "Yeah, sure. Well, these are the things you shared with me, so let's fix it. Here's some ideas." No, not, and then they'll say, "No, not like that."
Yep.
Because that
Yep.
requires them to make changes, right? Because legacy toxicity, there is power in dysfunction. Make no mistake, Marquita. When there is a long-standing toxic leader or a toxic organization, people start amassing power differently, usually
Mhm.
negatively, but power is power. And when the person, so they'll recognize, yes, it's bad. Please fix it. But that means they're going to have to give up the power that they amassed in the negative behaviors that they did that kept them safe, right? But now they're
Mhm.
negative. They're not needed anymore. But that means they have to give up power to get to more positive. That's a struggle. So keep that piece in mind when you think about, okay, Trina, I want to stay longer to get that thing handled. Keep in mind, and I see your point. I see a lot of resonance in your body language here that you've
Yes.
seen that. So acknowledge that so you can give yourself again that space for compassion here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great segue into recovery and grieving.
Mhm.
So you've shared a series called Grieving During Low Morale Experiences.
Mhm.
Why is it important for library workers to grieve the job they thought they had?
So when I saw this question, again, it's an embodied question for me because I am not immune to low morale and I continue grieving myself. I think it's important to grieve because it's not something that you're doing, you're choosing to do. It's something that is happening. Like, I don't think people are choosing not to grieve. In fact, I think people are grieving, and that's why it's necessary to, I think it's necessary to acknowledge the grieving that is happening because
Mhm,
people are not choosing to grieve. They are grieving. And when we come to these jobs, you come to every job with the idea. No one grows up thinking, I'm gonna be harmed at my job. When people are thinking about the things that they want to do in their lives, if they think about it through career, well, generally, what most people I'm thinking are thinking of is how do I make an impact and help out? And of course, get compensated. Yeah, all that. I need compensation. I need benefits. But how might I help out? And then you come and go through this experience and you're trying to help out. And you might even be helping out. You are, in fact, librarians are helping out and they're being harmed while they're helping out. That's the thing. Folks say, that's the gag, right? We are in fact helping, and people are harming us while we're helping, and it's colleagues that are harming us while we're trying to help. That's just a grieving. You have a job that you thought you came to do, that you thought you're going to be able to do, and you did that job and people crapped all over you. They literally sabotaged you. They yelled at you when you came with the idea. They act like you didn't say anything. They looked you over when you were qualified. They made sure someone else was getting paid more than you, even though y'all were equitable in all areas. You told HR and they just let Sam stay there anyway. And then they might even say, yeah, I've heard about Sam before. I don't know what's going on, and then Sam gets to stay and now you're gone, right? That's
mhm,
a grieving. Sam gets to stay in that job and they treated you so poorly that you had to leave that organization and Sam is still there. And you had projects that you wanted to get done. In fact, you left a project that you were really excited about, and now that project might be held by somebody else who's not doing as they might be fine. So all these points are grieving points. You have a loss. You have lost something. You have lost your confidence in the organization. You have lost your confidence in yourself because someone's implicitly, explicitly telling you you're not good enough, or you're not good enough to be protected, or not important enough to be protected. Right? The powerful person is just better that we wait. This more expensive for us to let them go. Money is more important than your safety. A person's longevity in the organization is more important than your safety and the work that you have done to help out. Those are all grieving points of loss, of how you thought it was going to be, and it's not that thing, of how you thought you were
mhm,
gonna be treated, and it wasn't that way, how you thought you were gonna be even being received, and it wasn't that way. You weren't even welcome.
mhm,
They asked you to come on board, and then they treated you unwelcomely, right? Like, wow, right? All these are points of grief, and that's why it's important. So I don't think people are choosing not to grieve. I think we need to acknowledge the grief. You
mhm,
worked through a pandemic, and they didn't even bother to give you masks, but they sure did make sure that everybody else had all the funding
mhm,
in your municipality. Everybody else had all the funding, and they wouldn't even give you a mask, and they expected you to be
mhm,
open at the height of a strange disease, which there's no
mhm,
cure at that time.
mhm.
That's a grieving.
Yeah.
You're finding out that people don't care about you as a human. They think about the idea of libraries. Librarianship is a profession of nostalgia in the culture. It's not a
Yeah.
profession of contemporality, and that's
No.
due to lots of factors. But
Yeah.
what's the story that people
Everyone
tell you?
loves.
Everyone loves
Yeah.
their first librarian.
Just.
The
Yep.
politician comes who loves libraries, never talks about library. Rarely do they talk about libraries in contemporary terms. They tell you the
Mhm,
story of go, like Marquita. They come to the place, and what story do they tell you about the library? The politician will tell you about my mom used to take me to the library every weekend when I was a kid. La,
when
la,
I
la.
was a kid. Mhm, yeah. What's your favorite book? Oh, there's so many. Curious George. Really?
You're at 65.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I I hate I don't hate it to say it, but I do everything is so validating. And I know that that's that weird dichotomy for you of like, yay, aw, yay, aw. But but I You are reading as if you are in my brain in
Uh-huh.
the last 17 years of my librarian experience, just plucking and
Yeah.
picking it.
And we're doing
Yeah,
great things. This is the
we
thing.
are.
We know that we are doing
Hmm.
very contemporaneous things. Some of
Hmm.
many libraries even are living in the future. If these censor people would stop bothering us, we could get to the future, quite frankly.
Let
Like
us
we're in
work.
the future, like their library is working in the future, certainly. However,
Hmm.
we continue to not have a grasp on getting rid of this nostalgic view of libraries from other people.
Hmm.
And that's how they present to us. They still present the nostalgia of libraries to us when they think about libraries. The most we'll get is, "Oh, y'all help me find so and so and so." Okay,
Yeah.
good. Um, but
Hmm.
generally, it's a profession that is seen as a point of nostalgia.
Yeah. We don't often get to tell. So for context, I think a lot of people know, but for the sake of this conversation, my last system, I started a trade skill training program for the
Mhm,
larger community at no cost to any patron that signed up.
mhm,
Um, Out of it became so popular, and we launched right just as they were finding or had finalized the vaccine for COVID.
mhm,
So we launched at a time where people had lost their jobs. They were looking to do something else. They were just curious. They had a lot of time on their hands. They just needed something.
mhm.
So we launched this program, and it was an instant hit. I think it still is. But out of that, I found a niche in the community where the need was, and the it came out of me reading an article about how baby boomers are retiring out of trades.
Mhm.
And there's a huge gap. I think at the time it was something like 82%. Is probably higher than that now
Whoa.
because they're baby boomers, they some of them came out of the military and went right into trades. And
Mhm,
that's what they did. They, amassed their fortunes. Maybe some of them have their own trades businesses now, but they're aging. They're not
mhm.
climbing on ladders to look at a roof, right? They're also not really trying to learn how to use a drone to look at a roof. But, well, Timmy across the street, he's not really a college guy. He knows technology, he knows how to fly a drone, he's willing to climb up on a ladder and a roof. I can train him. And now we have a young, fresh generation of people fixing
Yes.
roofs, your plumbing, your electricity. Um, we even got into solar,
That's
and
so cool.
it was so important for me to get that out there. And the organization that we partnered with, they hadn't even thought about diving into libraries.
Mhm,
They did a case study, and then that led us to media outlets, the news, magazines. It it put me in another, level of librarianship where
yeah.
people were recognizing my work, and then which was fine. That's but I didn't do it for that. I did it because I saw something.
You saw a
I
need.
I saw a need. I knew how to fulfill that need, and not just in our local community, but throughout the larger city, the county as a whole, the major metropolitan city, the state, the
Mhm,
country, right? Because
mhm,
you took these programs in our library, you got the certification that you needed, we helped you get an apprenticeship because we had MOUs with three different organizations for apprenticeships,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
You get that apprenticeship, you start making a little money, you go get professionally trained. They train you. You
mhm.
get your certifications, right? Now you've leveled up from apprentice, now you're a mid-level trainee or something like that. You don't have
Yeah.
to stay in this state, right? Like you've got everything that you need. You can go
Go
somewhere
anywhere.
else. You can go anywhere. And to see that and to be at the center of it, and then to have someone try to take credit for what I built, that was a catalyst for
Yeah,
wanting to exit. um but I still get phone calls about it because my name is attached to it,
yeah.
and anybody who
And
is
you had that
remaining.
frisson of grief, like, "I could still be doing
Yes,
that if I
I
could
could
imagine
still
what
be
I could
doing
be
it
doing now if
right
only."
now,
That's a
and
grieving
yeah,
process,
it's
like,
a grieving.
think about it, like,
Yeah.
think about it in any other point of grief. If it's a person, right? If so and so were here, we could be blah, blah, blah right now, and they're not here,
Yes.
right? So, but this is the thing. So when I started this research, I had no idea that I end up in this trauma-informed area. I just did not My question was, "Hey, if you're having a low morale experience, holler at me," right? I never like so, and I think too, another point of recognition, the importance of recognition. Here's where it is. We have to go to work, right?
Yeah,
Like most of us,
most of us.
we go to work every day. We go someplace, and our society says we go to work because we're a productivity-based capitalist society. We go to work. We spend over 8 hours there, 8 hours at least. When we are experiencing harm at a place where you quote unquote go every day in order to make a livelihood, right? It's seen as normal. That's not really trauma because I mean that's everybody goes to work. Trauma is usually seen as this like outlier events, right? Outlier events of catastrophic nature that threaten your life. You go to work every day and someone is bullying you. That puts you in a state of threat on your life every day. But because it's at work, people tend to diminutize it, to act like it's
Mhm.
not a trauma. I'm here to tell you that that's a trauma too. And we like to put things like ordinary trauma. We would attach the word ordinary to trauma. There's no such thing as ordinary trauma if you feel like you are in danger. And guaranteed, when somebody's bullying you, you do feel like you're in danger. Even if your life, quote unquote, isn't immediately threatened, you are at danger when someone is bullying you because they could decide at any point that they could take it up to mobbing. They can go all the way up to violence. So there's a continuum of harm, right? It could be as dispersed as snark, the passive aggressive comment. But if it's every day, you spend a lot of time ruminating. What did they mean? That's a harmful thing, and we know that pain of exclusion is just as harmful and painful as actual pain to the body. Social exclusion and not belonging, which is done through raggedy shenanigans of raggedy communication, that tells you that they don't think enough of you to be clear with you. That's a form of exclusion.
Mhm.
Even if it's trained and ingrained, it still is just a trained form of exclusion, communication exclusion. So I want everybody to know the idea about grieving and why it's important to grieve is because you have been pained, you have been harmed, you have experienced exclusion, which is a social pain that is antithetical to humaneness. We create communities. Humans want to be in communion with other humans. That's how we are wired. When those and then when low morale says anything that's causing low morale is an inhumane situation where you are being disconnected from a group or another person. Therefore, it's inhumane. And we will grieve any point of inhumaneness in the group. So you have to recognize, we have to be able to recognize it. It's important to recognize it. And of course, you're going to grieve it when it happens because we're not supposed to be doing that to each other. It's antithetical to human relationships.
I want to ask two questions as it relates to the future of the profession of librarianship. And then I'll ask my closing questions that I always ask of every guest.
Okay.
So because we can talk all day, but I know you're busy, you got stuff to do. You got stuff.
I
I'm
would love
off
us to
today.
talk more.
I'm
I would
chilling.
love to talk
Yes,
more. It wasn't supposed
absolutely.
to be this way when I looked at my schedule on Friday.
That's fine. Life happens. Life happens. Okay. So, in the context of the future of the profession, you have an article titled We Already Know Better. And in it, you call for centering beneficence in librarianship.
Mhm.
How can we move the profession towards a more humane and ethical standard of practice? And is that possible?
Anything is possible because I believe in imagination and we all have one and we're librarians and we are the purveyors of sort of way of imagination through all kinds of expression, through books and art, and other places that we have positive expression in human life. So yes, it's possible. I think we need to have a very good look at our code of ethics and recognize that people don't use it. And I know that because I asked.
We
And
do
so,
not.
and why not? Because it's not necessarily enforceable. If someone decides not to give the highest level of service, what's going to happen to a librarian? If someone decides to share their, whatever, but not do any of the values of librarianship, what happens to that
Mhm.
librarian? Low
Nothing.
morale tells me that nothing happens to them because we don't even like a low morale. Like the low morale experience rarely is. I'm not giving the highest level of service to my colleague in this library workplace. So what happens to the librarian who breaks the code of ethics? When we and the most commonly broken principle is patron confidentiality and privacy. So we need to determine when we think about codes of ethics, which are put in place not only to give us standards, but to increase trust with the community, which we were like again, we were relying a lot on nostalgia to do that for us, not our code of ethics. We're
Right.
relying on our ideas about what people think about libraries, and that's what builds trust with our library user is nostalgia and stereotype, not the code of ethics. Because if that were the case, we would all be out of jobs, according to these understandings of how we invoke and refer to our codes of ethics.
Hmm.
Do we provide service? Certainly we do, even to our detriment. But we're not even in charge a lot of the highest levels because who runs our budgets?
Yeah.
Municipalities, boards of trustees who, again, are functioning on what libraries should do based on nostalgia. Not
Hmm.
realizing that actually we need millions of dollars, not just saying $50,000, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there's that. So I do believe, but we need to do that. We need to look at our codes of ethics. We need to be stable in our values and not change them every 5 years based on who might get mad at us, or who might come after us. Whatever we need to be 10 toes down for our values, and they are what they are. And they need to be actionable, and we need to start measuring them and showing how they have been done. So when we have our retention and advancement concerns, we're not just continuously to tell us the whole story. We need to be saying, this is why, at this point, we should be able to say exactly why and have definitive countermeasures on how to do that. When it comes, and again, when it comes to low morale, like you just said, you and I are Black people, and we are acknowledging that when we are harmed in workplaces, that tells us to leave this organization and the field. So we can't have it both ways. We can't be bringing people in and treating them like crap. They're saying, well, why are you leaving? Because I'm a human.
Mhm.
Humans don't like, humans have limits
Yeah.
in terms of what they can take when they're being harmed.
Mhm.
So those are some things we need to be thinking about. So I'm always thinking of countermeasures, and one of my countermeasures is self-preservation, which kind of goes out the window when we're navigating low morale. We start thinking about the other, which is a expected response to trauma. When a person is harming us, we're trying to stay alive, so we tend to curl up to do physical curling up, mental curling up, so we are protecting more of ourselves, right? But what is not the methodology to promote is just self-care and as we continue to talk about well-being, I am seeing these pockets of commodification of well-being even in the library space, which is concerning. We need to be thinking about self-preservation and how to practice self-preservation. When we are in low morale, we tend to forget those skills, or some of us, if we are coming from certain backgrounds, are never really taught self-preservation. What we're taught is defense mechanisms, which sort of similar, but one is a skill, one is a automatic response. So we want to be thinking about how to stay embodied. We want to be thinking about, yes, do we want to care for ourselves? Certainly, but if we are not preserved, what exactly are we caring for? If our bodies aren't here, what
Mhm.
body is being well-beinged, right? So we need to figure out how do we incorporate library information science study, not only thinking about harm, but where we are, when we think about beneficence.
Mhm.
Beneficence is not only understanding the good outcomes, but recognizing where we may be causing harm, even inadvertently, and being thoughtful about how is this good thing might be not so good in some place. Where
Mhm.
might it cause harm? And planning for those things and or being responsive if something happens where we didn't anticipate harm, making a countermeasure for it when it shows up. But
Yeah.
what tends to happen in libraries is we don't think of it. We're only thinking about "Oh, that has to be a great program. We'll help so and so, and it'll be great." And then that community comes and says, "Hey, yeah,
Mhm.
that was nice, but maybe you shouldn't have blah, blah, blah." And we don't do
Yep.
anything about that. We never apologize, we never repair, we never reconcile. We either just
Yeah.
stop the program, which had a lot of helpful things, we just stop it because we're scared to be criticized, right? But a
Mhm.
lot of scientists knows that iteration is key. That's why they call it clinical trials.
Mhm.
And if we call ourselves library scientists, then we should be aware of beneficence, understanding benefits, maximizing them, recognizing risks, mitigating them in the moment and planning for them and mitigating them as they arise. And perhaps if we did that, we'd be more humane and things like whether EDIA, which is important and should be done. Imagine if we just treated people humanely. What might that look like? People will be welcome. And when they tell you what's happening to them, you will believe them and respond accordingly, right?
Yes.
Right. So perhaps
Yeah.
we need to be thinking about that, and then it's going to be measurable, right? Because we're treating it as a scientist. It's a hypothesis. We're figuring it out. So, equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, those are important things that we should continue 10 toes down. And also, hey, when we even do EDIA work, how is this harmful, even though it has benefits? That's why we know things about intersectionality now.
Yep.
That's it's beneficent in action. So it doesn't cancel it out, but we need to be thinking about it because we're scientists and we should be iterating and responding to people that we're
Mhm.
serving in real time and recognizing that even though we're a profession that has a lot of good to offer, we also cause harm. How might
Yes.
we mitigate it?
Yes. Hmm.
In
Hmm.
practice, and not
Hmm.
as an afterthought. When we're conceptualizing programs, who was never at those tables? We just
Yep.
deciding to do things for them. That
Hmm.
sound like the Tuskegee experiment to me.
Yes, it does. I got called out for bringing that up once and not in a good way, but we don't have time to dive into that right now.
Yeah.
I
And
want
that's
to
a
talk
big
about
example, everybody,
that's
for
okay.
someone saying that is not the same. But when you are making decisions for people and not responding in real time and
Hmm.
not mitigating the harm,
Hmm.
okay.
Yep. Because I want the people to hear about your reset experience that you held earlier
Oh,
this
yeah.
month. So really quick, tell us what that is, if you're continuing it, and then the biggest takeaway folks in attendance had from the whole experience.
So, as I mentioned just before, renewal started out as a group, and I will continue to create spaces for people to share their experiences, right? So that's the main part. But as I continue my work and gather more countermeasures and people I can identify who want to help people mitigate risk and navigate their recovery, the reset experience is an opportunity for people to learn about what more low morale experiences are, so they have that language because I recognize not everybody knows my work, so they get to it's an opportunity for me to always say, this is what it is." And then what I do is I'll bring in people who are able to help people learn about skill sets, countermeasures that can help people along recovery. And then the most important thing about the reset is we have an opportunity to practice. Just because we know about things doesn't mean we know how to practice them. So for instance, people will say, well, Katrina, you talk about assertive communication as a countermeasure, but what happens if I tried? And what does that mean? Or how might I do that? Right? This is an opportunity for you to come and learn and have a practice associated with it to resonate with other people who've had these similar experiences. Usually in the chat, people will say, this is what's happening for me. And people, this is the last one, people are like, oh, hey, yeah, call me. I know how to give me a call. Okay. So that's what we wanna see. We wanna see that I am not leading and telling everybody what it is. I am certainly giving information, but this is an opportunity for you to lead your recovery with other people. Y'all can lead together. We can go together. It's not just someone sitting here saying, "Go out and be prescriptive. If you do this, and this, then you won't have low morale anymore." That's not what it is. This is an opportunity to explore recovery in a way that means something for you. It's
Mhm.
meaning for you, an opportunity to practice, and that's what they got out of it when we finished it. It's 2 hours, it's free, because I believe that, people who are and you can't be se you can't we can't keep selling every avenue of support to people, like,
Mhm.
librarians don't get paid, okay? So this is an opportunity for you to come to an event for 2 hours, no cost, for you to learn and be in community with people, true community with people. Um, and that's exactly what they got out of it. I got some feedback. I'm definitely planning to do it again because that's what I'll be doing. I always do it. Um, and that's what they seem to get out of it. So my goals are to recognize, refine, and renew. Basically, recognize what's happening to you, refine or clarify some skill sets, and then reimagine your life. Those are the 3 goals of the reset.
So before I ask my last and final rapid fire questions, is
Okay.
there anything that we have not talked about that you want to briefly mention?
I just want people to realize, no, I just want to take this 10 seconds, whatever. It is not your fault. Harm that happens to you in your workplace is not your fault. And also, I want people to recognize that when it comes to that legacy toxicity piece, what might your role be in keeping your organization in spaces of toxicity? If you're a leader, what is your stated skill set? And what are some shadow areas of that skill set? If you're saying that you're collaborative and all your team have been harmed, your collaboration might look like something different to them. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Bit of self-reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awareness and reflection. Mhm.
Okay. What creative works are currently occupying your time?
I'm trying to decide if Imma watch Heated Rivalry. I keep hearing about it, and, like, do I have time to watch it? I think I may. I think I might. Y'all, what y'all think? Should I watch it? Well, I think I
It's
might
a
watch Heated Rivalry. Yeah, yeah.
it's a quick
Um,
weekend watch.
it's a quick weekend watch. I think Imma watch it, and, I listened so I like this book called, by Solomon Rivers called The Unkindness of Ghosts. I've read it, and now I'm listening to it again, and it's a lovely listen on, audiobook, so I'm listening to that in my spare time loosely here. Yeah. And y'all know, if y'all heard me, y'all know I'm a fan of K-pop, and I just went to the ONU concert, and it was great in Atlanta, and so I am re-listening to his entire catalog, Shiny included. So I'm pretending
Nice.
like, I'm going all the way back to 2009, and I'm coming up all the way up to his, latest album as a solo artist, so I'm still connected and enjoy Korean popular culture, particularly, the music of Shiny and their discography, so I'm enjoying
That's
that, my
cool.
comfort
Yeah.
music.
Yes. Comfort.
And yoga.
Yes. I need to get back into yoga. Okay. What's one thing you will always be proud of?
Personally, well, you only one thing?
Sh-
Okay,
You do one personal, one professional.
thank you.
You're
So my
welcome.
most prideful thing personally is my son, Ethan. He teaches me so much about myself and, just he's a fun person and I like him a lot and I love him. But that's my most proud personal project, so as it were. And then my most proud professional moment is asking that question 10 years ago and
Mhm.
giving people so many opportunities to share what's happening to them. I will never I don't think I'll ever be tired of this work, and moving into critical hope too. And so much so that where it's brought me to now, which is teaching courses on critical hope, which is which is one of the main countermeasures and a framework now that I apply to my entire life. But it came through this low morale. So I'll be teaching this class at the University of South Carolina in June. I've been teaching it at Dominican University School since 2025. But all of these things are directly related to asking, "What is low morale? Come talk to me about it, please." All those years ago. The way it's brought me into community with library colleagues in a way that I never anticipated outside of my sadness about it. I am truly electric with joy to do the work, to create the spaces, and to continue gathering information so people can feel empowered in their lives, and not just their work life, but their whole life.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
That I can persevere through these awful stories. 'Cause I
Mm.
think sometimes I really just be like I really sometimes wonder if I'm making an impact because the stories keep coming. And so
Yeah.
that I can persevere and continue to find ways to ask new questions and get more information, considering the reaction I have when I hear the stories. But I'm just determined. I feel like I don't have enough time, but
Mhm.
the time I have outside of taking care of my other point of pride will go to
Mhm.
this point of pride.
And I feel like I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What does life after libraries and this library work look like for you?
Probably travel. I would love to travel more.
Mm.
South Korea is one of my favorite places in the world, and I haven't been able to go back in some time. So I would like to go back to what I perceive as my spiritual, my place that I just feel truly all of me in Korea. So I'll probably be there more often. But even then, you know what? I'm a library nerd. I'm not gonna lie. I cannot perceive of a life without being in a library or being connected to libraries. Because even when I go to Korea, they looking at me like I'm like, "Can I come see your library?" And they're like, "Okay." Okay, you know? So, I will always be in the library in some space. It's just it's one of the few places where I've never had a problem feeling welcome, so I'll
Yeah,
always be there.
cool. Those are my major questions. Would you like to tell our listeners where they can find you online if they want to connect further?
Sure, you can find me at renewalslis.com. That's the current URL right now, and I'm also on LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, you can find me, and I'm at Kaetrena at renewalslis.com. Those are my major spaces. If you would like to know what I'm doing more often, when you go to Renewals, make sure you click on the link to the newsletter. I usually share things first with the folks on my email list.
This has been great. I 110% will find time to have you back so we can talk more
I'm
because
excited.
this was not enough. This wasn't long enough, but I'll take what I can get.
I thank you so much for sharing with me and contacting me and sharing. I think you've done great work as a librarian. And I also want to thank you for creating this podcast to give voice to folks who, I think there's a myth that there's a lots of places where we can go to have conversations. And quite frankly, that's not necessarily the case. So I appreciate you creating this platform so Black folks can talk with each other and share our experiences and share our projects and our writing. So thank you so much for having me.
For more information, you can visit us online at www.blackinthestacks.com and find us on most social media platforms at Black in the Stacks.